I was 17 and a foster kid. The family I stayed with had this old typical San Francisco style two-story house with wood floors. One night, I went to the bathroom that was right in front of the stairs on the first floor. As I was about to walk back upstairs, I saw the bottom of a lady's long white gown at the top of the stairs. I thought it was the foster mom or sister and asked if they wanted me to leave the light on in the bathroom. The gown just turned and went down the hallway. I thought it must have been my foster sister because she was little, like 10 or 11, and did that sometimes. I went upstairs and peeked in the parents' room. They were snoring. I went back to our room where my sister was dead asleep in her bed, wearing a t-shirt. I was freaked out and quickly closed our door as I suddenly realized that there was no sound of footsteps walking on the wood floor. I hopped in bed and hid under my blanket for the rest of the night. As a kid, I grew up on a street that was newly developed. There was a vacant lot across the road and led down a hill to a river. I had a recurring nightmare that me and my brothers were in the lot picking up rubbish. I'd get to the riverbank, look in the water, and a red demon would drag me into the water to drown. I'd wake up terrified. This happened a lot when I was a kid, and as I got older, the dream stopped, and I didn't really mention it to anyone. Fast forward many years later, and my 5-year-old daughter wakes up crying from a bad dream. I comfort her and ask her if she wants to tell me what the dream was about. She tells me I was in a field picking flowers, and I got too close to the river, and a red devil dragged me in. I didn't know what to say. It sounded just like my dream. She has had the same dream a few times since as well. I was coming home from work one night. I was too tired, so I got home and went right to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to my roommate knocking on my bedroom door, telling me that someone was trying to open our back door. I woke up and let her into my room, and we peeked outside together from my bedroom window, where we could see police lined up with their lights on in the front of the house. We called 911 to see if the dispatcher would tell us what was going on. She let me know that a man had attacked a woman with a machete. He was running from the cops through backyards, and he was probably in ours now. We then saw a bunch of cops with their guns drawn, and a canine officer walked down our driveway, kicked down our fence, and released the dog, catching this man and arresting him in our backyard. The creepiest part happened the next morning. We went to look at the damage to the fence and saw a bloody handprint on our white back door. I'll never forget it. My mom used to call my grandma every single night. However, during a family camping trip when I was 15, she was unable to call her because the cell phone reception was horrible. So my dad promised we could go to the nearest town for breakfast in the morning so that she could get service and call grandma. But when we got to the town, mom had over missed calls and voicemails. Most of them were from my cousin who lived across the country. She would always talk about having visions, but my parents and I thought she was full of it. My mom listened to the messages, and my cousin was crying and saying someone was hurting my grandma at the exact moment. She kept asking for my mom to call or go to her because she was being stabbed. My cousin described fire and being suspended in the air. The remaining voicemails from other family members trying to tell mom that grandma had been murdered. Someone had broken in, stabbed her, tied her up, and then lit the house on fire. It was bad enough that my mom blamed herself because it happened during their usual phone call time. But the intense mix of visions is why we don't really talk about my grandmother's death. When my great uncle was alive, I saw him once a year and didn't have a really warm relationship with him. 10-year-old me thought of him being old, a bit peculiar, but kind. The day he passed away, my parents went to his house to clean up before they sold the place. I inherited the piano. I always wanted to have a piano in my bedroom, so I was filled with joy when I got it. One day, I was alone in my room practicing the note, when suddenly the piano took over. I had mastered only the intro, but the piano went on with the parts I didn't know. You couldn't see the keys being pressed, but you could hear it. I called my sister and a friend, and they turned pale. After a while, it stopped by itself, like nothing had ever happened. So weird. After several times, I cannot believe it. I used to have dreams all the times, They were moments that would end up happening, like I experienced them in the dream. One night, I had the most vivid dream about a car accident. So vivid I thought I must have seen it on TV while I was falling asleep, but I realized that wasn't possible because I had gone from seeing the accident from the outside of the truck to suddenly being inside, viewing from what would have been the backseat if the car had won. I saw the truck flip over and both passengers hit their heads, killing them. It really bothered me because it seemed more real than other dreams. I couldn't shake it. I talked about it with a few people and carried on wondering what prompted it in the first place. Several weeks later, I arrived at the sense of an identical accident. Same truck flipped over in the exact same spot as my dream. Half in the left lane of the highway and half on the grassy median. Every detail was the exact same, and it horrified me. After several times, I cannot believe it. I've been a nurse for over 20 years. I've had plenty of weird, creepy experiences, but this one chills me. I had two older patients that I was taking care of, one in 304 and one in 305. If there wasn't a wall between their rooms, their headboards would have been butted up to each other. The gentleman in 305 was completely nonverbal. He didn't talk, he didn't respond. His pupils were fixed and staring. He was physically alive, but mentally not there at all. My patient in 304 was basically there to die, but she was completely alert. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, she took a turn for the worse. She was struggling to breathe, panicking, begging for help, but adamant that we don't do anything to save her from dying. I turned up her oxygen, called the doctor to get orders, then started doing what the doctor ordered to try to get her comfortable again. While I was administering meds, my nurse tech came to the bedside next to me. In a horrible voice she said, "You have got to go to see room 305. I had another nurse stay with my patient in 304, and he did to 305. I heard him before I even walked in. He was singing in a loud, beautiful tenor, singing about meeting God at the pearly gates and going home. I slowly walked into the room and said his name. No response. He kept singing. I grabbed his leg. No response. Still singing. I shook his arm, but he didn't respond to me at all. He was just laying in my bed, staring out at nothing, and singing about going home to heaven. I stood and listened for a few seconds, but I eventually went back to my dying patient. After about 25 minutes, she took her last breath. I set about doing all the things I needed to do after her death, but remembered my patient in 305. I went to his doorway, and all I heard was silence. I peeked my head in and looked at him. He was laying there, as usual, staring out at nothing, completely silent. Once my other patient passed, he stopped singing, and I never heard him make another sound the rest of the time I cared for him. I found the whole situation kinda beautiful, but it still freaks me out. This took place during the time of the war. Our house didn't have air conditioning, so we kept our windows open. One night, I heard a dog bark and then what sounded like a bottle hitting the ground. After that, she stopped barking. I went to get ready for bed, and I felt like someone was trying to look at me through the blinds that they had closed. I went to bed anyways, and drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I was being overtaken by mosquitoes. I yelled out to my father, confused, as to why there were so many mosquitoes in my room. I sat up in bed and turned on the light to find that the window at the foot of my bed had been opened as wide as it could. The blinds were pulled completely up, and the screen had been removed. That had been done to several windows in the house. Soon after, my dad fenced in the backyard and installed central air conditioning. That was so weird, wasn't it? I was on a road trip and heard a voice in my head say clearly, "Accident in Oakville." I don't know what it was, but I was on edge and drove extra carefully. I pulled up to a red light and left extra space in front of me due to this warning. Suddenly, there was a loud sound. Things in the car went flying, followed by another loud sound. A vehicle traveling at full speed had hit me from behind and pushed my car underneath the cube van in front of me. The extra space I left in front of me as a caution saved my life. My car was repaired, and I survived the crash. I had a friend who died less than a year prior to this accident, and there is no one in the world who can convince that it wasn't them who protected me that day. Sometimes you hear some things that you cannot believe in, but they are real and they can easily change your life.